Hello, and welcome to the Advent IM podcast, Risk and Business. This week, a special interim edition looking at policing data, policing technology, the new AI Covenant, the future of AI in policing, secure by design, and data-driven policing. So, a fair bit to get through today. So, let's get straight into it. I'd like to introduce my special guest on this podcast, Mick Hayes. Hi, Mick.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Mick Hayes. I'm one of the senior consultants at Advent IM, and for the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of work with the policing force in particular, and the sector.
Welcome, Mick. Thanks very much for joining us today. So I thought let's start by looking backwards. So as a company and as individuals, we've both worked extensively with police forces over the years. What have been the traditional challenges that police forces have faced when it comes to managing technologies and the adoption of new technologies?
A lot of police forces have looked after their own infrastructure and estate, which is aging. It's getting very expensive to maintain. It takes a lot of resources to look after, and it does need expertise for those sort of technical resources to look after it. I think everyone would agree there's been a data explosion in the amount of data what's out there nowadays, and it becomes just much more difficult for forces to sort of look after that data, capture it, use it. And I think from a staff perspective, those either officers, and all the staff in the background as well, it's just difficult to look after. How do they look after it, and how can they use it?
Yeah, and we often think of the police as being the police.
Yeah.
In the same way that we often use terms like the NHS or the government, but actually what we've got are a whole number of disparate organisations, all with independent buying power and often using not necessarily complementary technologies.
Absolutely, that's right, and immediately you're correct. You just think of the police force, but not only are there a large number of police forces within the UK, and supporting organisations, they've all got their individual relationships with a lot of support organisations, third parties, and in a lot of cases they're probably even using the same sort of supporting third parties, etc. as well. And I think this is something in the past that it's very much been sort of just that individual force all have been looking after in their own in their own approach.
So there's certainly efficiencies to be had from doing more joined up thinking and more collaboration around. I know that police forces have for a long time done regional collaborations, but they very much tend to sit in the special operations arena rather than for general everyday policing.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
So then all of a sudden along comes artificial intelligence, right? And that's going to fix everything for us.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And it's becoming more widely used. It's out in the public arena. Everyone has got this awareness of the term AI, artificial intelligence. But what does it mean for police forces? How can they use it? I think the reality, which I think everyone is sort of coming to, is actually we're already using it, and I say we from everyone, collectively as citizens, members of the public, police forces, we're all using AI to one degree of another. We probably
and I want
to understand where we're using it.
Absolutely, and I do wonder at a senior level how much they genuinely understand what artificial intelligence means and how it's being used. A big challenge, and certainly in the government's playbook, one of the key principles they came out with was that senior leaders must understand what AI is and how it's being used, and then ensure that it's being used, lawfully and ethically. And the NPCC Covenant for using artificial intelligence in policing uses very similar language: transparency, explainability, responsibility, accountability, doing things in a way that is ethical and fair and lawful. So there's a lot of work to be done here in terms of balancing what is fair and lawful and balancing what is ethical.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you point out, that AI Covenant was is a I think it's a really good sort of starting point, because it has been produced from a collective agreement by all bodies of the government and the police forces to come up with those principles on how AI should be adopted, and therefore designed into how police forces use AI technology.
Yeah. And I think they certainly, for in terms of public confidence, I think there's a lot to be learned from some of the mistakes that were made in the early days of adopting technologies like facial recognition, about being more transparent and open with the public of how this technology is going to work.
Yes, yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and that is a fundamental factor, I think, in lots of the sort of direction I've seen as well, when it's been sort of delivered to sort of police forces, etc. Because you need to have the public's confidence in how you're looking after their data, and the safety of obviously the public as well. It's a significant concern.
Absolutely. So there's going to be a lot of underpinning governance, risk, and compliance activities that are going to be needed if we're going to achieve these principles then.
There are, yes, and I think that presents its challenges, because again it comes back to sort of forces, resource issues, etc. And I think what it will, and it has been driving, is actually some more probably higher level support to this, and guidance, and just as example, for the police digital services, is that sort of overriding sort of digital organisation have done some significant work in producing blueprint designs
Right.
where forces can it's collective use of sort of that technology. So there's a certain amount of assurance activity or work's been done with maybe some of the sort of leading vendors out there, to how forces could adopt use of this technology, and if you follow the design, then it's almost like a certain amount of work has been done for that. So that there's a start. There's been a good starting position, but I
Yeah.
think the point I want to sort of get with that is what it's starting to do is rather than 52 or individual organisations or forces sort of delivering their implementation of that technology, what they're not having to do is 52 times the same piece of work. There's a certain
Yeah.
amount of work can be done, and it actually should make it a bit more efficient, and hopefully provide some cost saving measures to forces.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And it's interesting as well, because if you look at some of the language that's coming out of the covenant, it talks about AI usage will be subject to the maximum transparency by default. So, this is in some ways culturally counterintuitive to police forces about putting all your cards on the table.
That's correct. Yeah. So I think being by transparent how you are using data, in particular personal data, and what technology you're using to do so, what, as much as possible, what machine, what technologies you're using, such as machine learning, etc. What training, what models you're using, how you've developed them. And obviously there is a balance to be had there with the sensitivity of the data and the purpose which is used. But by being transparent to how it's being used, then what it can be done is by sort of recognised third parties can scrutinise actually those models, etc., to make sure that they are actually doing, shall we say, doing what they're supposed to, and not nothing more.
So this is definitely not um, this is not something that can be done in isolation. This isn't something that is purely an IT requirement here. The requirement to make sure that all deployment of artificial intelligence complies with data protection legislation, to make sure that it complies with ethics requirements to make sure that there is that transparency by default, to make sure that there is explainability, which is going to require communications experts to be involved as well. So this isn't a pure IT project. This has got to involve multiple specialisms from across the organisation.
Absolutely, and I do think that probably brings nicely onto the bit of a concept with the sort of where secure by design starts coming into this, because it's like secure by design. The fundamental principle with that is have security inbuilt from, I'd say, from birth to death, but let's say, from concept of the technology, the system, through to its decommissioning right at the end. So hence right from the start all the way through. So because if you do bring that in, it's been considered at all times, from design it through to operational use, through support through life, through to the end. But also it's not to be as an isolated sort of siloed approach with security, sort of their way doing their own thing and looking after it, by being fully involved in that system, in that project, with all personalities involved. And I think, as you rightly point out as well, it's not just about personal data. It's all data it's collecting, because there's probably far more. Although a lot of data might relate to an individual in some respects, because it's the member of the public, it's the person they're concerned, shall we say, but there's probably far more data which doesn't have. It wouldn't be considered as personal data, or it's it's properly anonymized, etc. But as I say, it's sensitive in many respects, and it needs to be looked after.
Yeah, it could be all sorts of stuff, couldn't there? Intelligence data, telematics, geolocation data. It doesn't necessarily have to directly pertain to an individual, be what we would consider to be individual information per se, but still has a sensitivity. And to be clear here, when we're saying about security as part of Secure by Design, this isn't just the IT security element of it. It's security in the much broader sense of the governance, the risk management, compliance elements, assurance elements, audit elements. It's beyond just the technical aspect of security.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's where the where the secure by design has been introduced, and it's been introduced by sort of the NCSC as their sort of secure by design principles. But what a lot of organisations and public bodies, etc., have started bringing in, with the concept of secure by design, they're all very similar, as I say. So it starts off and it is based around that, as I say, security, from the start till the end. Yeah. But they are quite heavily based on sort of the NIST cybersecurity framework and some of its supporting controls in the it's the SP 853, but that's basically the security and privacy of information systems and for organisations. But what that cybersecurity framework introduces, as I say, it introduces everything, as I say, from the proper governance, physical security controls. How are you physically looking after and protecting these policies and procedures? As I say, it has brought in all these sort of methods. It's fundamentally to protect data, but as I say, I absolutely agree, it's so much more.
And that's interesting there as well. What you're saying there is it's balancing security and privacy, which often go hand in hand, but also have slightly different priorities at times.
It does as well, and that goes back to most will be aware of the CIA triangle. The triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and it's always regarded, is confidentiality and availability is a balancing act. It's that seesaw, isn't it? That you can't completely have one without the other. You want to make the data available to those who need to use it when they need to use it. As say, timely access, but there probably has to be a little bit of give in that. A bit of confidentiality. You can't absolutely protect, because because let's face it, absolute protection means making it available to no one. So
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there's a lot of talk at the moment about data-driven policing.
yeah.
In order to achieve data-driven policing, you've got to have better and greater access to data to allow policing to make intelligent decisions.
That's correct, and it goes back to a point I made probably quite early on. Is there's a data explosion? Everyone, I would say you could say pretty much everyone is using or producing data every day, all the time. Because if you have a phone of any description, it doesn't have to be a smartphone. You could be sending and receiving text. Everything. Most your houses have technology, so the sheer amount of data what's being produced by everyone is one thing. That there's the term big data, but a colossal amount of data being
Yeah,
produced. There's there's also the expectation. The public want they have an expectation on the police forces and that they're probably quite tech savvy. They know how to use these technologies, etc. Because a lot, the abilities of the general public might vary in how their expertise, how they use technology, but they want to engage. If they need. With the police, etc., in using technology as well in a better way. So forces need to know how to use data and communicate, etc. But
yeah.
how so we've got there, how do we use all this data? But what do they want to do? They want to make forces want to get the best use out of the data. How can they use it? How can they use all that data? Is that data telling them something that let's say you could say manually, with a naked eye, it's looking for a needle in a field full of haystacks, as I like to say. You're just never probably going to get something from it, and
It's getting
and I
from
think where
data
it's
to
moving
insight, though,
to.
isn't it?
Sorry.
Sorry, it's getting from data to insight. That's the key thing.
That's exactly, yeah. So ultimately, what is data driven? You've it's the acquisition of the data. Where do you put it? Probably some sort of centralized repository or something where various sort of supporting technology can use and all pulled together. How can they? It needs to be analysed, and I think this is where these things like the AI etc. will start coming in, because it was starting to analyse it. People have probably been aware of a product out there, Power BI, Microsoft product. It produces insights in nice, reports, meaningful insights to the receivers of those reports. In a lot of cases, that can be officers on the investigating officers. It could be, strategic leaders, etc. And all I say is doing is just developing and probably producing even better insights, actually, and from large quantities of data at multiple sources.
Because it is fantastic at doing the heavy lifting and doing that
Yeah,
detailed
yeah,
analysis and looking at, I mean, even just taking two or three spreadsheets and analyzing them and saying these are all very similar pieces of data, but here's the bits that don't line up. It's great at the analysis stuff, but it is not in itself going to do data-driven policing. We still need police officers understanding how to use that data.
absolutely. And I think there's a couple of aspects of that there. And I'm glad to see in the AI Covenant, those principles what have been drafted is there is that there's the safeguard of the human, the person, the officer responsible for ultimately making decisions on obviously what it produced, looking at it, particularly with something more sensitive. So I say things like 999 call handling, etc. It should be a
Mhm.
human intervention. There needs to be check mechanisms in that it's actually producing what you want it to do.
Yeah.
There is a saying, isn't there, with a lot of these sort of models, for machine learning, etc. You put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. So it is, it's that human person that, with the data analyst or whoever creates these, does that look at it's actually good data. Your
Yeah.
source data is good. You've properly trained it. You've determined what you want it to produce for you as well. It's
And
all
there
good
has to be that
questions.
there has to be that safety backstop of the human, so that
Yeah.
if the technology starts doing unexpected or delivering unintended or undesired outputs, we've got to have a means of being able to intervene on that and not just let it run wild.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's and that is critical, and that does go back to it's reassuring. It's the public confidence in that it is being looked after properly, and again, I think that's where that transparency comes in as well. Then, because then, as I said, your models, etc. Your product can be submitted for that sort of obviously in a correct way, but submitted for that external scrutiny. So much the similar, like for many systems, we might have annual ITL checks, penetration testing, those sort of elements. I would see some of these things as being, well, it's no different. It's just a different form of technology that you're getting an independent check of it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we definitely live in interesting times, and times that are ever rapidly changing. So I'll put you on the spot a little bit here, Mick, and say, given where we are today, what do you think the future for data-driven policing looks like?
I think it's much more widespread use of AI technologies from some of the big vendors out there. So that, I think it's probably widely known out there, police forces and those sort of designs. It's probably, Microsoft Azure has, been the big player there, but, it's a trusted partner, it's scalable. I think probably more widespread use of those sort of cloud technologies, because it does start enabling uh, more appropriate sharing of data, and sort of maybe allows some, shall we say, even shared user resources as well. So maybe we make cost savings for individual forces, where they collectively start joining together on different aspects. I think there has to be, though, probably a wider adoption of probably more, cloud-based, and sort of starting to move away from sort of the more on-premise type solutions.
More nationally
Um,
sponsored systems and less locally procured systems?
I think so. Yeah, definitely so. And one of the things the police forces SPD policy has said as well is SPD is mandatory for all national systems as well. And what it's enabling to do, I think, on that basis, with national systems, then you've got a collective that, there's a lot of that assurance work is already being done at the national level. So effectively, it can give, I think it can give individual forces some confidence, therefore, in the data and work it's doing, that there's actually some, there's a lot of sort of, assurance activities already been done with there. Because ultimately, that sort of chief, that force's chief constable, etc., their CIRO, they've still got to do a fair degree of responsibility, for what its forces doing, isn't it?
Well, certainly, I think the national silos are going to have their hands full for a few years.
Yeah, I do think so. And I do think, as I say, AI does need to, not only does it needs to be embraced, it will. I think it's inevitable. It will be embraced. It has to be, and therefore continuing the road to make sure it's securely adopted by all forces is the key. And I think
Yeah.
and the challenge, absolutely, is the challenge.
Yeah, AI is no longer on the horizon. It's here, it's now, it's present, and we need to adopt it and use it and harness it. And, in my opinion, govern it properly
Yeah.
before it gets out of hand.
It is as well, because I think one thing we've sort of not really mentioned already is because um, I would I would argue that AI technology and all modern, emerging technologies are probably more widely and better used by cyber criminals. Uh,
Absolutely.
the adversary. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you build it, they will find a way to hack it.
Absolutely. So not only are forces challenged with being able to have to counter that and protect the systems and the technologies they're using, they also need to investigate the crimes what are being reported where this is being used as well. Again, so that feeds into the data-driven policing. Again, because of that, so much more data will be produced with that one. And I think without the insights being produced by using a bit more automation and AI, etc., I don't think they'll probably ever get what they need out of it, or as I say, get some of those to get the information out of it, and maybe get the evidence what actually enables someone to be caught and successfully prosecuted.
And ultimately, that's what policing is all about:
Yeah.
is the detection, prevention, and prosecution. And everything we do with data in policing has to, in some way, ultimately enable those end results. And I think that is really where it's important for police forces to understand that secure by design isn't some sort of concept over here that doesn't affect frontline policing. Actually, secure by design done well will increase the productivity, the effectiveness, and the efficiency of frontline policing, which result in better prosecutions.
Yeah, definitely so. And that's the one thing with the this whole sort of SPD, as I say, it. I think it's very flexible actually, and it's very flexible according to the what the risk appetite is against what its particular use is, what the data is concerned, etc. So it's not a tick box in that respect, but it will cover. So when we mentioned about technologies, it will cover everything from the sort of body worn camera, video camera that the officers were in. The system for as say call handlers are using. There's so many things. It affects every single person, not only involved in the force concerned, but as I say, member of the public. So
Yeah. Well, we certainly live in a very interesting time. I would say that I'm currently living in the science fiction of my childhood, which makes it interesting to those who work in and around technology, risk, and security. I'm sure this is a topic that we'll come back to more than once as we go through these next 12 months, because it's going to continue to evolve. But for now, thank you, Mick, for your insight and your discussion. It's been very interesting. My name's Mike Gillespie. I've been hosting the Advent IM podcast, Risk and Business. If you've enjoyed this episode, then you can find us on all of the major streaming services. And if there's a topic you think that we should be discussing that we haven't discussed so far, then please do get in touch and let us know. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So for now, goodbye.
goodbye.